as a restaurant owner, you can never take for granted, the people that support you and you know, allowed me to make the food that we make. And it taught me just the biggest lesson that I would always want to use, his wood and local food and support people in my community, because that's really the most meaningful thing.
Let's discover the Cleveland entrepreneurial ecosystem. We are telling the stories of its entrepreneurs and those supporting them. Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today I had the pleasure of speaking with Chef Doug Katz. For the past 25 years, Doug has focused on creating fulfilling experiences for Clevelanders to enjoy. As chef and owner of Zhug, Chimi, and Amba here in Cleveland, his driving purpose is to spread joy through meaningful experiences and shared passion. Doug is also a chef and partner of Provenance at the Cleveland Museum of Art, as well as the former chef and owner of Fire, Food, and Drink, which operated in Shaker Square for more than 20 years. Doug is passionate about using fresh, high-quality ingredients with integrity, and throughout his career has been celebrated for his unwavering support of local farmers and food artisans. He advocates nationally and internationally for sustainable, healthy, and local food systems, and frequently consults with media and civic leaders on local food initiatives. He is an advisor for Seeds of Collaboration Tahini and Smart Soda. He also serves as a chef ambassador for the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafoodwatch program, which promotes environmentally responsible fishing and fish farming. And he is also a consultant for Perfectly Imperfect Produce, which aims to reduce food waste and improve healthy food access. He also serves on the board of the Countryside in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park and has held leadership positions with Destination Cleveland and Cleveland Independence, an organization of 90 locally owned restaurants that nurtures and promotes local independent restaurants. Esquire magazine named Zhug one of America's best new restaurants in 2020, and back in 2014, the prestigious James Beard Foundation nominated Doug for Best Chef of the Great Lakes region. Doug's passion for his work is genuinely inspiring. It's hard not to be a huge fan of Doug if you've gone to any of his restaurants and witnessed the care and attention he and his team provide to create the best experiences. I loved hearing about Doug's passion for food and his journey to become one of Cleveland's most renowned restaurateurs and chefs. Please enjoy my conversation with Doug Katz. So we were at Amba a few weeks ago for my birthday with my family, and my very loving and supportive mom did her very mom thing and mentioned to you that I run this podcast and that we should connect here to share your story. And so with much gratitude to my mom, here we are. Sincerely, though, I have been excited to have you on for a while now as the creator of some of my favorite Cleveland experiences and home to some of my favorite Cleveland memories. So thank you very much for coming on, Doug. Excited to speak with you today.
Thank you. I'm excited to connect. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So I think there's a lot to cover here with your breadth of experience in food here in Cleveland. But I'd love to start with maybe the origin story, if you will, and where you developed a passion for food and kind of take us through that journey.
So let's see. When I was about 7, I remember my brother often saying to people as he would introduce himself, or people would ask him questions. He was my older brother, about 2 years older. They'd ask him what he was going to do when he grew up, and he would always say he wanted to be a chef. And I think I liked that answer, and I used to say that myself, just sort of copying what he said. And I think for me it stuck. For him it didn't. So back then, I think I was able to prepare my whole life to be a chef because I kept telling people that's what I was going to do. And so I started eating immediately a lot. Every food experience is what I remember. Every food that I ate at that age, I just started eating whatever was in the refrigerator to the point of excess. But I certainly got an understanding of all food at that age, because of all of the food that I did eat. I was not into sports. I was, I came home and I, just raided the fridge and I would sit and watch television. And my mother was an amazing cook and she would take cooking classes and she would share that experience and her passion for those experiences with us at the dinner table. My father at that age also, he was into his garden. We had a house in Shaker and we had this little garden that was maybe, I don't know, 10 feet by 4 feet, and that he would just work on all season. He would, pick out his seeds and he would plant them. And he even created this piping system that he drilled holes into and connected it to our hose so that he could water his plants. He had tomato plants and cucumbers and peppers and basil, and he had these little apple trees. And literally, it was such a small space, but he just maximized the yard. He also planted flowers all over the yard. So he was always outside, working in the yard. But at the harvest time or, during the later summer, he would always bring in his vegetables and he was so proud. And he pickled his vegetables and they'd slice the tomatoes and salt them and serve them with our hamburgers. We'd make tomato salads with the basil. He would pickle the peppers and the tomatoes and the cucumbers. So always sort of using that food. But at the same time, too, all I think about is my mother cooking, and we would sit at the dinner table. We would finish this huge dinner, and then we would always talk about, okay, what are we going to have for dessert? So we'd go up to the corner where there was this amazing donut shop, and we would get donuts and bring them home and eat those. And, every memory I have is about eating, pretty much.
Yeah,
and
live to
I
eat.
think they really instilled that interest at a very early age.
So I'm going to get very hungry through this conversation. I just realized. At what point in your love of food did it turn from a love of food to an interest in cooking?
I would make breakfast with my father on Sundays, and I would do, I'd help my mother with dinner. My mom had cookbooks everywhere, and I would sit and I'd read through the books. And backing up a little bit, my mom, as a reward to my brother and I at an early age, she said to us that one time we were allowed to pick a day and stay home from school and make a dinner for the family. And I still remember being able to do this. And I was so excited. I don't even remember what year this was, but we planned out the menu and we read through the cookbooks and wrote the recipes and went shopping. Of course, the day that I had chosen to do this, I woke up and I was sick and I had the flu or something and I wasn't really able to do any of it. So my mother ended up doing it. But I think she just made it so fun, that cooking experience, that it started me up. So at around 15 years old, I tried to get a restaurant job. I went to Zach Brule. He had a restaurant called Z Contemporary Cuisine, which was in Shaker Heights at the tall office building by Van Aken. And I went there and he said, well, what experience do you have? And I had no experience. And he said, well, I'm not hiring you with no experience. You have to go get some experience. And so I went to a place called Shuhei, which was a sushi bar in Cleveland Heights that I also knew about. And I loved their food. And I talked to Hiroshi Tsuji, who was the owner, who currently now owns, hopefully I said it was Shujiro. And now he owns a restaurant called Shuhei. And so I went there and I asked him for work and he hired me and I was able to be a busboy. And the best part of that job was every night at the end of the night, I would wash all the sushi platters and any extra sushi in the sushi bar. I was able to eat the leftovers while I was washing these sushi trays. And then at the end of the night, the whole restaurant staff would sit down to a meal and everyone in that kitchen would prepare an element of that meal. And so we had steak and rice and kimchi and all of these different things that the staff would make. And I just felt like such an adult and so independent. And I just loved it. But of course, I still wanted to work for Zach at Z. And so after about a year, I went back to him and I said, now I have experience. Can I work here? And he hired me and loved that experience walking around this restaurant. And there was so much energy in the kitchen and so much energy in the dining room. And people would come and eat this food and just loved him and loved this experience. And he did such an amazing job and his food was pristine and delicious. And I think it just inspired me to always, want to do that too for myself and have a restaurant. But as I was doing that, I still was a little bored and wanted to do something other than my homework. And so I would read through the cookbooks and I thought to myself, I should start a catering business of some kind. So I would read through the books and I wrote out menus, and my parents would entertain their friends and have them over, and I would cook for them. And then one of my parents' friends decided to have a dinner party at their house and asked if I would do a party for them. And he had a wine cellar. And at 16 years old, he asked me if I could research all of his wines, all the ones that he chose for this dinner, and pair the wines with food, and do a multi-course dinner for him and his wife. Of course, I never asked him how much he would pay me or anything. I just was so excited to do this. And so spent about 2 weeks researching the wines and prepared a menu, ended up doing the meal, prepared everything in my mom's kitchen, and they, helped me get it over to the house. And I had a couple friends help me do the dinner. And at the dinner was a food writer who she wrote for Friday Magazine, which was part of the Cleveland Plain Dealer at the time. She wrote an article about the dinner and said how great it was. And so from that article, people started to call me and say, would you do a dinner at my house? And so I started catering in high school. And at first, it was maybe once a month I would do a party, or maybe once every 2 months. And then it just was so fun to do this. And I hired my friends to help. And by the end of my senior year, I had done a wedding for about 90 people in Bracknell for this woman and I had my parents help me bring all the food. And I had probably 10 people helping me in the kitchen, and just, I think, really gained confidence that I could do this. And then I went to college. I went to the University of Denver for hotel and restaurant management, and would come home in the summers and let people know that I was going to be catering again. And I would book the weekends for those summers before I got home. And I would ask my friends if they could help. And so really just started a business for myself, and just was I just loved that independence. And I felt like I was a real adult.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. I mean, you were really able to start to take it seriously quite young.
For sure. And, I think at first, I had a real battle with food, I think, and I still, I feel like finally I'm able to manage that battle, through my weight. But I was always a kid who ate and ate and ate to fill myself up. And I think it was something that wasn't so healthy. And I think throughout my career in food, I've really learned to address that. And I've made it such a positive, I think, through my career, that has really helped me turn that around for myself.
So at what point in your experience with catering do you begin to, think about, wanting to start a restaurant, a destination, a place for people to go?
So I think the catering experience, I forgot one important story. My dad had a roommate from college who came to visit, and they were taking their son to Cornell for hotel and restaurant management school. And I was probably 12 at the time. And they stayed with us. And my parents told me he was going to hotel and restaurant management school. And I thought, oh my gosh, there's a school where you can go work in a hotel or work in a restaurant. That was so cool. And so I always thought that in the back of my mind. And, knowing that, when I was applying for colleges, I applied to University of Denver and Michigan State. So all hotel and restaurant management programs. So I knew I was going to start there, but I ultimately knew I wanted to go to culinary school at the Culinary Institute of America. And I'd always sort of thought of this. I had heard about the Culinary Institute, but I knew I wanted to go to college to really get a background in business as well, because I knew it was important. If I wanted to open a restaurant, I was going to have that experience behind me. So I started at the University of Denver. I went to school over the summer, a couple summers, to finish a little bit early, because I really wanted to go to the Culinary Institute and start that off as fast as I could. And so I finished in January of my senior year. I just couldn't get there fast enough, I guess. And so once I got there, this was January, I was in Hyde Park, New York. I don't know if you've been in Hyde Park, New York in January, but it is the most depressing, the coldest, the most lonely, terrible place that you could be. But I was so excited to start culinary school, and I started, and it felt so different than college. It was a much more vocational experience. Really a shocker to realize what I was going to be doing. And the feeling you have in upstate New York in January is really the feeling you have when you're in a kitchen. You just feel like you're sort of in this dungeon or in this no windowed room, or you're working and working and working, so physical, on your feet all day. And I have to say, it gives you really the great perspective of being a chef, because that is it gave you that reality, which I think when I was in college and I was doing these parties, I was the movie star, or I was the theater,
Right.
I was the star on the stage. Now you realize what the job really is, which is peeling the vegetables as fast as you can and sauteing these vegetables and cleaning up the whole kitchen and mopping the floor on your hands and knees and getting yelled at by the chef and all of these things, which still didn't diminish my passion for it. But you really get a taste of what the business is about and how important it is to work hard. And as someone who really wanted to be liked by everyone, and, I was in the perfect career for myself, but it was one of those challenging, eye-opening experiences starting culinary school. And then after culinary school, I moved out to Portland, Oregon, had read through some of the trade magazines, and there was a restaurant opening. I had known of this chef. His name was Corey Schreiber, and he owned a restaurant in San Francisco. And I had heard about how he had this restaurant with tandoor ovens in it, and he made amazing food. He was written up in Food Arts magazine, which at that time was just this really great magazine, talked about what all the chefs were doing. And he was moving back to his hometown in Portland, opening this really cool neighborhood restaurant with an open kitchen with wood-fired equipment. So he had a tandoor oven, and he had a wood-burning pizza oven, and it said that it was opening about a month after I graduated. So I wrote him a letter. He called me back. He said, "You're welcome to move out to Portland, but I don't really hire people from across the country. You have to come out here to Portland, Oregon. And, if you're willing to come out here, I'll interview you. And if you're right for the team, I'll hire you." And so, of course, I did that. And he hired me for, I think, $8 an hour after culinary school, which I thought was really great. The restaurant was finishing up. I was so excited because it was a new restaurant, and we got to unpack all the pots and pans, and we had all these training sessions, and just felt like that. What I loved about catering was like I was just so independent, and I was able to work in this cool restaurant that was getting all this, with this really famous chef, and loved the menu, and he showed us how to make all the dishes, and I got to work the pizza oven. I would say there I really learned about local food. We out in Portland, there's an island called Sovi's Island where they grow a lot of the produce, but we would have vendors come to the back door with arugula. We would have fishermen who would load like a whole halibut on the top of their car, and at 11 p.m. someone would knock on the kitchen door and say, "Would you like this halibut?" And the chef would look at it, and he'd buy the halibut or the berries or all these different things. And it was so unique to me because at the time in Cleveland, when I was growing up, there wasn't really that opportunity to buy local food. And so it was exciting to see that connection and the passion that kitchen had. And so I worked there for about 2 years. One of the best parts about this job is you can move to the best places in the world. And so I picked up and I gave notice, picked up and moved to Aspen, Colorado, beginning of the ski season. And they always hired people at the beginning of the ski season. So that was a really, whereas Portland taught me a lot about local food and just simple food and using the equipment and the local ingredients. Cooking in Aspen, you rely on the airplane flights and the trucks that will bring you your food. And if the roads close or if there's huge snowstorms, things like that, you can't really get food. So the chef at this hotel was really focused on the dishes. They're the menu items that he created. He would put like 20 items on a plate, and it was just this most beautiful designed plate and so many components to the plate. But it wasn't really about the local tomato or the local cucumber or any of that. It was much more about what can I do to just make this plate look the most, so beautiful. So I did that for another 2 years. And then I thought it was time to move out of that and come back to Cleveland. And I really was on a visit to Cleveland, not sure what I was going to do, whether I would move to another city. But I decided to interview with these two guys who were opening a restaurant in Beechwood called Moxie. And those guys had owned one of the best restaurants in Cleveland called Lopez y Gonzalez. They also owned Cafe Brio. They were the restaurant guys in Cleveland. I mean, they just did such a great job. They were really schmoozy, had great food, and just always remembered them from my childhood, just growing up, that they were the restaurant people in Cleveland. I set up an interview to meet them, and we had a great discussion. And think then they asked me to do a tasting for them. And so they had owned a catering business in a hotel at the Embassy Suites. And so I went there to prepare the food. And they had a group of about 8 people come to the hotel, and I put out all of the food for the tasting, and they loved the food and wanted me to be the chef. And this was going to be a 220 seat restaurant. It was 9,000 square feet. It wasn't built out yet. It was one of these things I wasn't really sure I could handle, and I was not really prepared to do it. And they said that they really wanted me to, and they would give me all the support. And not many people probably go to an interview and try and talk the people out of hiring them, but I tried to do that. But they kept saying, no, we really want you to do this. And it ended up that I just did it, and I kept moving forward. I created the menu and the prep sheets and, helped them design the kitchen. So it was just an unbelievable experience. And I was so lucky to work under them. That was Brad Friedlander and Craig Summers. Worked there for about 2.5 years. Had an amazing sous chef, had an amazing team, loved the experience, but I was really working hard for them. And I was really excited to have my own place at a certain point. And so in 2000, I had read an article that these developers were redoing Shaker Square. Shaker Square was a nostalgic place for our family. I mean, my parents would talk about going there when they were little, and it was just this great shopping district that had like an FAO Schwartz there, and they had Higbee's, and I think all these, it was sort of this, they talked about it as it was the best place in the world. And there was, even tree lighting every year, and just felt like a really great community. And so these people were renovating the whole square, putting about $30 million into it. And I thought, that's where I want to open my restaurant. I met the landlord there, and I told him, he said, what kind of restaurant are you going to do? And I thought of all my experiences, and I had always dreamed of having my own. So I could tell him easily that I wanted this open kitchen, that the kitchen was going to be the centerpiece of the space, that, I loved the windows that looked out onto Shaker Square. You could see the rapid transit running through it and the historic buildings, and I could just visualize the patio, and we were going to do brunch and lunch. And of course, I was going to put a tandoor oven as the centerpiece of the kitchen because I had worked with that in Portland. And we had a pizza oven as well where we were going to do pizza, and just really, could visualize the whole thing. And they were really excited about it. Luckily got my father and my father-in-law to give me some money to start it off. But I had saved a lot of my money from my jobs, from babysitting onward. So I was able to put some money into it as well. And my wife and I would sit with the architect every week, and we would talk to him about, he would present us with a plan, and we would dissect it and talk about how, well, maybe we do this, maybe we do this, and how do we fit all this together? And we put a party room in so we could do little parties. It was just the most fun process, and to sort of sit in this space and see it come to life. And then we started building out the space, and it became the biggest nightmare of my life because you needed a construction degree, which I had no idea I needed. Every week there was some issue. Oh, we needed to do a new sewer line, and we didn't know that because we didn't know until we uncovered it in the floor, or the pizza oven couldn't fit through this door. So all of these things where I thought I had laid out a budget perfectly and had done all of this work to really prepare myself, every week there were challenges and issues. But of course, as I learned on my overnights and in culinary school and all of the hardships, I think that it prepared me to take all of this in and just roll with the punches and do it. And finally, we were able to open in June of 2001. Really just, I had a great team, and people just loved it from the start. It was very simple cooking. As I would tell my wife, she would always listen to how I'd explain the food. And she said, that is not simple, but I always thought it was simple. And I have the original menus, and I think to myself, wow, that was super simple, because as the years went on, it got more complex.
Yeah. Wow. What a journey. So you always had in mind that you wanted to start your own restaurant. I feel like as you went to these different places, were you approaching those experiences in kind of an explicit apprenticeship kind of way, like to learn and just absorb as much as you could? Or was it just kind of serendipitous, the opportunities as they arose? Or was it always with this end in mind that, I'm going to start my own place someday?
I think it always was in my mind that I was going to open my own restaurant. What was my dream restaurant? And I think I thought of that every day. And I think I created my own luck and my own path. And though when I look back, there was much more intention than there actually was. I think that applying to colleges and applying to this internship and applying to this job, I sort of think because of my passion and because of all the reading I would do or all the socializing and all the I think things just came to me and they seemed right, and so I would go after those opportunities. And that sort of created my path. And I don't think that I really looked at any other paths. I was very sort of specific to, I'm moving to Portland, Oregon. Where am I going to work? Going to the Culinary Institute as fast as I can. I'm going to Boston. I sort of knew, and I knew I was going to only spend 2 to 3 years in a place because I really wanted to get on with what my ultimate goal, which was to open my own restaurant. So I think it seems like it was much more intentional than it actually was. And I think I'm very lucky that things worked out the way they did. But yeah, I think it was all leading up to opening Fire. But I think also along the way, I didn't know what I was going to learn. I didn't know that I was going to have a passion for the tandoor oven or for brunch from the Boston Harbor Hotel or for this product or that product or loving to cut this vegetable or loving to use these local ingredients. I just sort of knew that, I was exploring and there were certain things that I loved doing. There were certain things I didn't. And the only way I knew was through that practice and through exploring and experiencing things. And so I think that's what the Fire became the culmination of all of that, all of those experiences. And even with Moxie, like it was too big of a restaurant. I didn't like the largeness of it. So I certainly, when I was going to open my own restaurant, it was much smaller and more intimate. Got a little bigger than I had anticipated because I realized through doing the financials that if it was too small, I wasn't going to be able to make it work. But yeah, I think it just was through all of the time and all of the practice. And I was lucky to know so early what I wanted to do that it really helped me create a path for myself. Yeah, and Fire was, when I think of the menu, I didn't set out to use local food. I set out to do a really quality job with the technique, and I wanted to educate all the cooks, and I wanted to show the cooks in Cleveland how to prepare food in a way that I hadn't really seen in Cleveland in the way that I had experienced my education. And I really wanted to be the person who, I was at Moxie, I was one of the youngest people in that kitchen. I hired people who were 50 years old, and they would work in that kitchen for 2-3 weeks and they'd say, why am I listening to you? Why are you telling me that that's the wrong way to do this? I've done this for 20 years. And I would say to them, this is how we do it. And if you don't want to do it, then you don't need to work here. But I just really knew what I wanted. And I think I gained the confidence through that. But at Fire, I knew I wanted to have it be a teaching kitchen and showcase the kitchen for the community and showcase how important the kitchen is in the restaurant experience. I don't think it had been done in that way at that time as often. And one thing that I neglected, and I was lucky to hire a sous chef who really cared about this, there's a farmer's market right outside my front door. And when I opened the restaurant, I didn't really plan to use local food to the extent that we did eventually. And he really taught me. Every Saturday he would go to the market and he would bring back some, products. He'd bring back apples or he'd bring back, cheese and things like this. And I always just thought, I love that he does that, but I just could never imagine using this food in the restaurant. Like, how are we going to have a farmer deliver this food? How much? I mean, do they have more than 3 pints of apples? Do they have more than a pint of tomatoes or a jar of pickles? But he would always do this, and I just thought it was so great. And so we worked on that. And the first product that we bought from the market was firewood, because I felt that was the most consistent. That was the thing that I didn't have to worry about.
Right.
I didn't have to worry if it went bad. It was something that we really needed because we had this tandoor oven and we would light the fire every day. And it was a fun story to be able to tell people that we bought that. And we bought some other products too. When the strawberries would come out or the asparagus, we would do certain specials and use that product. But really, my love for local food came from the wood purchasing. When I was maybe 6 months into purchasing the wood, we got onto a schedule where every 3 weeks we would get our wood delivery from Ray, the wood guy. And he would come to our back door with his wife and his daughters, and they would all, unload the truck and bring the wood into our basement. And it was just this process I sort of took for granted because it was like any other food delivery that we would get. Right. They'd bring it to the door and we'd unload it. And it wasn't a big deal to me at the time. I was happy to support this guy because my sous chef really liked going to the market. And then one day he didn't show up one Saturday, and we were down to maybe 5 pieces of wood. And as the owner, as this, young guy who was like, I wanted to make sure that all of our systems were in place and that everything was perfect. And I was that sort of young chef. I wouldn't say I was a yeller, but I was certainly someone who wanted everything. I was the control freak chef. So he didn't deliver the wood. So I called, he didn't answer. I called again, he didn't answer. Literally every 5 minutes I was calling. I left messages. He didn't call me back. This is Saturday. We had to go buy wood from a grocery store just to have enough wood for that night. Sunday, I call him. Monday, I call him. No response. Tuesday, he comes to my door with the wood delivery, and I'm so angry and just can't believe that he didn't call me. And I say, Ray, what happened? And he's with his daughter. And I actually get a little emotional about this because he tells me that his wife was hit in the head on collision on Saturday and died. And it immediately made me realize how, as a restaurant owner, you can never take for granted, the people that support you and make, allowed me to make the food that we make. And it taught me just the biggest lesson that I would always want to use, his wood and local food and support people in my community, because that's really the most meaningful thing. And if I'm going to feed people and, nurture people, it's a sort of a cyclical thing that, for me to have not taken that relationship for granted and to think that he wouldn't have shown up with our delivery, or that, I would think that, I couldn't believe that I was so heartless. And so he really just taught me, that I needed to care about every person, in that, restaurant, and anyone who bought, we bought food from. And I think it instilled that in everyone who worked for me. And it created the fulfillment, I think, for me and my restaurant. And it also, to this day, we talk about that story all the time, and I tell people that all the time. I don't always get this emotional about it, but something about that, it just always sticks with me. And I think that's what I need to instill in all the people that work for me. Our jobs and our workplaces and our lives, I think, take those things for granted. And I think as a restaurant, our job is to offer hospitality and to, offer this place where people can have fun, and the employees, offering them a place that's supportive. And so I think that was probably the biggest lesson that I learned, even more than skills in culinary school, was to really just treat people with respect and to care where our food came from, and to, always, be supportive, and know that the business can't be more important than the community and the people that make it all happen.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful.
But that drove me. Honestly, after that point, I could not buy enough local product. I didn't care if I made a profit. And honestly, it showed through fire. We would buy from farms, and we would go have our employee party at one farm, and we would, go to another farm and learn about this. And we would have field trips and learn about local food. And it was the most fulfilling experience, and such a, it's a place where people may have left there, but, always, if you were an employee there and, you were someone who stayed for a bit, even if it was really, really hard, or you left because you may have had really bad days or you had to move on. People always just look back on it, and I think they look at it as a treasure opportunity for themselves. And I'm so proud that we were able to create that as sort of our flagship place. And certainly wasn't without its challenges. We had a fire there, and we had, all different things. So fire, it was always busy. We actually had our ups and downs in terms of business. Shaker Square went through some rough times. The landlord handed it back to the bank at one time, and my wife and I ended up running our merchant association for a while. Stores closed. It was sort of a rough time. We had to close for lunch. We had to fire some of our staff because we just didn't have the income. That was in year 3 or 4, and we really learned, I think, how to run a business more effectively, more fiscally responsibly at that point. But we were able to rebuild, and we had a big catering business that we would run out of our fire kitchen to really maximize our income. But it was getting too big, and we needed to find another space. And so it happened that this diner was available in Cleveland Heights that had been 7 different businesses. And I read an article that it was owned by this bank. I knew they had a kitchen in there because I had been in there. And so I asked to see it, and it had the most amazing kitchen. It was like a great catering kitchen. And so I offered the bank the lowest amount you could think of, and they accepted it because no one else wanted this building. But it was perfect for me because I needed just this kitchen. And so we got an architect in, and we decided to reopen the diner side as a classic old diner. And then there was another diner. So this was a 1948 diner on one side, and then there was a 1952 diner on the other side. We decided to make that diner a bar car, which was going to be this really cool speakeasy bar with a locked door, and you'd ring the bell and the bartender would buzz you in, and you'd go in. It was just like no windows to the outside, just this really sexy room with banquettes and really dark space, but really cool cocktails and just really fun. But that sort of supported, the catering business was in the kitchen, but then we had the diner during the day, and when we had the bar car running at night. Really fun idea. The diner and the bar car really never made great money. We were sort of trying to work that out over 18 months we were open, and we were really struggling because we didn't have enough seats in the diner, and then the bar car was a little too private, and people didn't necessarily use it or know about it effectively. Yeah. But we kept trying to tweak it and make those work. And with catering, luckily, we were bringing enough income in to support those businesses, but it was difficult. And I'd say after 2 years, we had finally sort of come up with a great menu that worked in the diner. We were really seeing our revenues increase, and the community was really supporting it. I had an employee who one night comes into the bar car, smashes the door open, pours alcohol all over the floor, and lights it on fire and burns it to the ground. My wife and I get a call from the security company saying that they got a fire alarm alert or something. And luckily at that time on my phone, I had an app that showed me the diner, and I could see, and I saw this haze of smoke in the visual. This was 4 a.m, and I'm like freaking out, and I'm like, I've never seen this before. And so we run up there, and luckily I live about 5 blocks, and the whole diner was in flames. Luckily, we had a video of the whole thing, and it showed what he had done, like knocking out the cameras. And it was, I think
traumatic. That's crazy.
It was pretty traumatic. But at the same time, I think this business really taught me how to, be a survivor. And I think I just looked at this as it was like losing electricity or having my cooler go down, or the things that happen in the restaurant business, I think prepare you for any emergency or any issue. And so I think when these things happen, I'm able to really be cool and calm and collected and just go. And so we went through this process, and I think to this day, I think it still is just something that happened, and we got through it, and we rebuilt, what we could, but the bar car unfortunately burned to the ground. So we made that a garden, but our catering business was doing really great. And we decided to close the diner. I rented to a coffee concept called Rising Star Coffee, who now has the front space. And we just used it as a catering kitchen for the longest time. If I go back to fire, having the tandoor oven, I was able to, we'd used it for roasting meats and fish. That was our main focus. And we cooked some some naan in that oven, but we really didn't ever use it for Indian cooking in the first few years. But my kids went to school with an Indian student when they were 3. They're now 19, and their mom had us for dinner, and she made the most amazing Indian food. And so I said to her, "Would you come to Fire and do a dinner? We have a tandoor oven." This was in like 2004 or something. And she said she would. And I said, "Well, we could have a small dinner in our party room. I'd love it if you help me create a menu and we can do the production." And she was really scared because she had only really cooked for her family. And I said we would, help her through. And so we prepared the menu. We started marketing the dinner. And in 2 to 3 days, we had about 120 people who wanted to come to the dinner. And
wow.
So I broke the news to her that it was 120 instead of 20. And she was ready to, kill me and I said, "Don't worry, we'll just produce all of this for you." And so over 3-4 days, she came into the kitchen and we learned how to toast and grind the spices and how to prep all the ginger and the tomatoes and the garlic and all of the different dishes. And we really transformed Fire's kitchen into an Indian kitchen for the weekend. And it was so well received, we ended up doing several of these dinners over the years. And that's the backstory to, once the diner had this fire, I was trying to think of other ways to utilize the diner. And so in addition to catering, I happened to be just home one day cooking, at my house, and I was making an Indian curry in one of my pots in the kitchen. And I was, I hadn't had coffee yet. I was just sort of sauteing the onions, the garlic, and the ginger. And I added my spices that I had toasted. And the smell just woke me up. And I just felt this euphoria of as I was cooking. And I thought, everyone asks me for recipes. Like they always want to know how to make this and how to make that. And I smelled this and I thought to myself, this is what people want, really. They just want that magic of they want to know that their house smells good, that the onion sauteing and that sound. And, they have this beautiful pot and it's that's what they want. And so I thought if I could package this for people, and sell this is what people really want. They don't really want me to give them my 3-page recipe on how to make something. They just want it to be sort of easy for them. So I created these spice and recipe boxes where we would toast and grind spices. We created 12 different spice blends. One was Indian, one was Latin, one was South American, one was Jamaican, all different, using all different products. And on the backs of the boxes, it had the ingredient list that you'd take the box to the store and you'd find all the ingredients you needed. And then you'd take the box and you'd have this recipe packet. You'd have this recipe card and then you'd have the spice packet and you were able to just make that recipe and it gave you all the instructions and all the equipment you needed, that kind of thing. It was super, some were simpler than others, but was really fun. And at the holiday time, I would do these holiday shows and people would buy these and give them as stocking stuffers and gifts for people. They were great for me to do cooking demos in the public realm. And we had a website where people could order them online. And then at Fire, we sold them as well. So when people came from out of town, they would buy them and take them back. And it was a great idea. It was something I had really a fun time doing. It helped us maximize the efficiency in the diner because the catering team really worked on the weekend. And so this gave them an opportunity to fill the spice packets and do all of that during the week. But it really was not, I learned that you have to sell so many of these and you have to market them like crazy. At the holiday time, you're going to sell them, but you're not selling them most of the rest of the year. So it was something that I just kept going for a while. But because of that experience, it really guided me to realize that my next restaurants, I really wanted to have more of an ethnic take on my restaurants and to really give people more of a global world experience. And Fire had that little element. And as the years went on, we did dabble in Moroccan and Indian. And, we added some specials and things to our menu that had some more of those flavor profiles. We also did a lot more vegan and gluten-free dishes at Fire over the years. And those were really because of all the hospitals and the diets in our community. The ethnic foods really lent themselves to those diets. And so all of that knowledge, as you talked about my culinary path, all of this, it seems so, like I had a plan, but I don't know that I really did. But I took all of the stuff that we were learning and combined it. And though the spice boxes didn't work, I did an analysis and I saw, okay, the Indian one, the South American one, and the Middle Eastern one were pretty popular. These were the ones that, and so we really took those three and we thought to ourselves, okay, what should we do? And I'm Jewish. And so the first, one I thought of was to do this sort of Israeli style restaurant, which is now what Zhug is. And also, of course, Indian was my first inspiration, but I was super scared to ever do an Indian place because I felt like it was so complex and how could I do an Indian place? But of course, that was popular and that was another one I wanted to do. And South American was the third. So, of course, in March of 2020, the pandemic hit. Well, I should take a step back. So Zhug, we found a space in Cleveland Heights that was this small space. It wasn't going to take a ton of build out and money to do, and thought it would be a perfect opportunity to open this Israeli concept. And so my business partner, Todd, and I went to Israel on a food trip. And in a week, we went to about 80 restaurants and had the most amazing experience. A friend of ours lived there and he showed us around. And though I knew some of the dishes and the foods that I wanted to do, it just really gave me a concrete idea of how I wanted the restaurant to feel and look. And, I wanted it to feel like Tel Aviv, but I wanted it to be my take and definitely a fusion. And so we opened that in November of 2019 and people loved it and they loved the shareable small plates. And we really tested all of our foods for many months and really just felt like it was a home run in terms of what we had created. And I'm lucky because I had a great team behind me who was able to take that time to help me do that. And they're still with me today. But we launched that. And then, of course, in March of 2020, pandemic hit and we had to close Zhug, which was like going gangbusters, just like crazy. And we had to close Fire. And we didn't think we were going to have to close for more than 8 to 12 weeks. We just sort of thought, it was going to be temporary. But as we had that fire and as we had all these trials and tribulations over the years, on March 15th, I went to the staff at Fire and I said, we're going to shut down. We feel like that's the best thing to do. And let's come back June 1st and we'll, reopen. And at Zhug, I said, you know what? We're going to close for in-person dining, but this is a perfect concept to do for takeout and delivery. And we're going to, create this takeout and delivery model just so that we can keep people interested in what we're doing. And I would do all the delivery because I had nothing else to do. And we had a great filmmaker who was our social media person at the time. And so she created these amazing videos and stories, tried to make it really fun and positive, even though we were going through the pandemic. And just every day we would post and talk about how, we're delivering and we're doing this. And it just really built an excitement around what we were doing. And it was so great that we decided we have this time right now with, we're only running Zhug. We weren't sure what was going to happen at Fire. And we decided this is the time to really explore the Indian concept and the South American concept. And so we actually named them. We created menus for them. One, Chimi, which is short for chimichurri, which was our South American concept, sort of a taco concept. And then the other was Amba, which was our Indian inspired. And so we first launched Chimi in June of that year, using the diner kitchen because, of course, there was no longer any catering because no one was catering. We had cooked for the Cavaliers for 3 years, doing all of their food for their pre- and post-game meals and for their airplane flights. We were just so busy with catering. And, of course, all of a sudden it just stopped. And so we knew we had to do something to survive in that building. So we launched Chimi in June. And what was great is Toast, our platform that we used in the restaurant, was really helping us. That platform just made it easy to get the orders online. We were able to deliver through that platform, get all the the address information, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And it was super popular. We did that from June until October, and then in October we launched Amba as the ghost. And these were ghost kitchens that we ran just out of the diner, and we would only do delivery and takeout. And we ran both of those for about a year and a half. And then we happened to find a spot for Amba in Ohio City. And the only reason we did that one first is because we were searching for a building and happened to find this building with a tiger mural on the side of it, which spoke to me about, Indian. And we did a whole design for it. And I will say the pandemic was the hardest time in our lives. We closed Fire permanently. We decided to hire an architect and build out, this Amba, and had this amazing designer who helped us with Zhug to create it. And we opened Amba last May. That was when we closed the ghost kitchens pretty much. And we're still looking for a spot for Chimi. The journey has been long and difficult, but also the most fulfilling career I could ever imagine. And I feel so lucky.
Yeah, we covered so much ground. Well, for one, just thank you for sharing all this. It's an
Sure.
incredible journey. One thing I do want to ask about related to all that is the overlap between, restaurants and food as kind of a culinary art and the business side of it, because it just seems that they're very parallel in a lot of ways, and it's a lot about survivalship. But lessons that you learn from the kitchen that you think have helped in business, and how where that can go both ways.
So I think when you're young, you think to be a business person, really, it's all about what you learn in school and all the financials and all the, that education. But I think what it truly is about the confidence, the making decisions, caring for people, really being, I always go back to the things you learn in kindergarten. Those to me are the most important things in business.
Yeah.
And I think it's all about your reputation, your character, everything is about the steps. And, you start here and you go the next step, next step, next step. And it's all about the practice. To me, you can't speed something up that isn't, you have to really take the time. And, I tell people in the kitchen, it's about the 5,000 bags of onions that you've peeled. It's not about, knowing that you've peeled 10 and now all of a sudden you can dice the onion. It's about roasting that chicken 1,000 times or more. It's about making that curry, 1,000+ times. It's about talking to these guests every night and seeing their gestures and seeing it's about the detail and about noticing everything, really. When you're in it every day and you're immersed in it and you're part of the team and you're able to see the nuances, that's what teaches you the most. And when you're able to be a part of these catastrophic things that happen and you're able to get through those, and when you're able to get the accolades once in a while and that helps you get through to the next thing, I think it's all about using every experience as a learning experience and not putting too much weight on the negative things that happen, but also, and learning from everything that you can. And, every customer that has ever told me, like, we did something wrong, or we undercooked their steak or overcooked their steak, or this was cold, or, this wasn't right. It like kills me for a month or a year or whatever. Yeah. And I do everything I can to just win that person back. And I think that my success in business is about the humble, side of myself. And I don't ever want to leave a situation where there's any bad blood or, I always try and repair a situation. I always try and get through it. It doesn't mean that I'm, I haven't messed up some situation or I haven't caused a huge problem, but I always, go back and I try and repair that, or I try and address it. I never leave things open to fester, because I just think you have to just come to terms with what happens, and you have to address the mistakes, and you have to know that you're going to make them. But I'm also a perfectionist, and it's hard for me to not, have things be perfect. And I think the people around me have taught me so much about the things that I don't have in myself, like being patient and being a part of the team and letting others, contribute. And it can't always be that perfection. And even if I think it's perfect, it's not perfect. It's just what I see. So I think letting other people in and letting other people drive the ship and support. And to be honest, I think this year has really shown me, I have this team who, I can tell you there's someone who's been with me for 16 years and 14 years and 12 years and 10 years. And those are the key people on my team. When I look back and I think at 2 years, I wasn't sure this person was going to make it. And then at 3 years and at 4, and it's to think that I've had this longevity with these people, that is the only reason that I feel like I'm a success in business. And it's about that team and the people, that are in our community that support us. And in business, I think it's a grind. And I think my entire life I've had those grinds, and I think that has made me strong enough to be able to deal with anything that comes my way, but also to stick with these things and to always look at that bright side and to always be positive, because there's always going to be a bright side and there's always going to be a negative, and I could focus on all the negatives, but I know that that negative is going to lead to something positive, or I'm going to be able to change it around and make it a positive. That's going to make everyone's life in my business and my, career so much better if I can help people do that for themselves and help people do that within our business.
Yeah, that all resonates. I'm curious how you've thought about this difference between, the chef's like creative expression versus the cook's, practice of the skills, the requisite skills.
My job in the business, I think, is that visionary and that person who offers that excitement, and that, it's in my head to create Zhug. And I think it's important for me. I mean, I drive people crazy when I'm with them, the ones who are part of my team, because I just am talking and talking and talking about these things and dissecting them. And I think I want to get what's in my brain out into my team's mind. And I think everyone on my team sees things differently. And so when I'm able to share that with Cameron, who's my chef in the kitchen, who's much more systematic and organized and understands, how to get, I'm the visionary, he's the architect. I'm the sort of dreamer person who's like, this is what I want to build. And then he figures out how to build it. And then Todd, who's my director of operations, now he's my business partner. He's the one who operationally puts it all into play. And then Phoebe, who works with Todd, really takes, what Todd sort of sees as the organizational structure, and she really drills into each area and helps communicate that to the employees. And then I'm always sort of there with the customers and with the chefs and with Phoebe and with Todd, and I'm always reminding them of the important things that I see in my head, like, with the food or and I'm always thinking about the guest, perspective on these things. And I'm really the representative of the guest and the person who's coming in. But I think when all of these people, when we're all in sync and we all understand everyone's role, I hit them with every angle of these ideas that they really can own it for themselves and bring the operational ability, or they bring those ideas to fruition.
I'm very interested in getting your perspective on is, maybe taking a step back and up from the, your individual contributions to the space, just how you are thinking more generally about like the evolution of the Cleveland food scene and where we are as a city as it relates to our offerings, where we do really well, where you think there are areas we could do better, and just your whole perspective on the Cleveland food scene.
That'll be a long answer, but not like any others haven't been. I think if I start back to when I opened Fire as my restaurant, I was always craving that restaurant that really taught people who wanted to be chefs and wanted to be cooks in the kitchen, who really wanted that. Yeah. And I feel like that was always missing, because it was always about the business and there was never that opportunity to really teach people the career and the techniques and all of those things. And so as much as I could, I always wanted to try and do that in my restaurant. And I think, unfortunately, most cities across the country have had this problem, and especially in Cleveland. Cleveland has, when we were in those recessionary times in the 2008s and even the 2004s, 5s, 6s, 7s, in Cleveland, we were sort of in this period where real estate was really low priced and there was a lot of talent working in restaurants. And I think there was this drive from line cooks and from people who had been in the business who thought they were prepared to do more than they actually were prepared to do, they were given opportunities because of the development that was happening in Cleveland. And so I think developers were giving these cooks opportunities that they weren't quite ready for. And maybe they were ready, but I think what happened is we grew too fast and we opened all these restaurants in our town, and it was really exciting. But I think there wasn't that understanding of how to keep your team and how to develop your team. And we also didn't have the number of interested employees to really support all of these places. And so what happened is all of a sudden we had all these places and we had all these needs for cooks, and we were starting to, bring in the dishwashers as our, prep cooks, and our prep cooks as line cooks, and our line cooks were the chefs. And much like I think back to like I don't know, even in the 30s, 40s, 50s, I mean, some of the people in this business work 60 years in the same role in one restaurant for their entire life. And I think, how I got to be a chef at the young age that I got to be a chef, I always have felt guilty for that. Like I should have spent 40 years being a line cook before I became a chef, and that you still couldn't learn all the things there are to learn in the business. And so I think as I look at that, the last 10 years, and I think how many restaurants opened, and then we, just to see how difficult it was to find employees and to find staff who would stay, it just made us all weaker. And we were sort of dividing out our armies. We didn't really have any expertise in these kitchens. And so there wasn't anything holding the teams together. And so the customers were putting a lot of pressure on these experiences too. And the chefs couldn't really handle that. And neither could, the cooks couldn't handle it, and the servers couldn't handle it. And it became this career that was just so hard. Not to say it wasn't hard already, but it was much harder because we just weren't prepared for all of the dreams and visions that that we as chefs had. But we were given those opportunities. And so where I think it left us is that we had a lot more mediocrity in our food scene. At a certain point, I think at first we had a lot, we were so lucky we had all these great places to go, and all of a sudden, but it didn't survive for very long. And then the pandemic hit, and then no one was working, and all of these places that were already weak, had some issues, and even the strong ones, couldn't survive. And so now I think we're in a period where we've really taken a step back. We've lost, if not half of the people in this industry, we've lost certainly a ton. And I think we're slowly, for us, we had to close fire. We had to close, we sort of did all of that so that we could move forward in a new way and in a new, exciting way. And honestly, we wanted to retrench, and we wanted to start back sort of small and grow more strongly. And I think for us, it's been working really well, but I can see that in our community currently, like there aren't as many places that you'll go out for an experience, and it's not an experience that you'll go and you'll be so excited, and then there might be some disappointment because, maybe two of the cooks didn't show up, or maybe, the dishwasher didn't show up. I think that's our time there isn't as much structure in these restaurants, and it's harder to run them. And so I think we've lost a lot of the growth that we had, before the pandemic. But I think we just need to sort of redirect and grow in a much more calculated and slower way. And I think we can get back to a level of quality, but I think we are lacking in quality in our food scene. And I wish that we were able to get back to a level where we were able to educate the next generation and find those people that are interested. We've also had so much bad publicity in our business, like, I don't know many people who want to, there are many less people who want to even join in this business. I think we've also just, even for high schoolers and for, we're not creating that experience to excite these people to want to join this business, because we sort of just talk about how terrible it is and how, and has gotten pretty difficult.
Right.
But I would say that I'm excited about what we're doing in Cleveland. And I think in Cleveland, we're lucky because we are a small enough community that can support the ones that are taking chances and are growing. And we can work together to rebuild and create experiences that we want. I love Cleveland because we are this small community that you can really find so many great food experiences and you can connect with the owners and the people. Yeah. And I think if we lived in bigger cities, you don't get that opportunity.
Yeah. No, I think that all makes a lot of sense as well. I feel like I would be somewhat remiss if I didn't ask you about, some of your, not of your own, but of your favorite, Cleveland eateries.
Well,
Oh no, we can do it in the closing question I have for everyone is for their favorite hidden gems in Cleveland, things that other folks may not necessarily know about. If you want to frame it in that way as well.
yeah, I just love, when someone puts passion into something, I just love supporting that. I mean, there's so many of these experiences. I mean, when I think of like Sosison, Melissa Corey, who works so hard and, has her shop, and it's such a passionate shop. When I think of Ramat Wiley, who has a Dune Spice at Van Aken, and I think of the Roaming Biscuit. I love Shonda, and Karen Small and Eric Williams, Karen Small from Juneberry, and Eric Williams from Momocho, and Jill Veda from Salt. I love these places. I love Batuki, Carla at Batuki, and Mark Arell from Vero. Some of these pizza places, Il Rione and Sense Pizza. Yeah. I'm probably saying too many, but I think what I really love is supporting the people that really are in their businesses and who care about, sort of their community and showcase that. Vinny Semino too, from Cordelia. It's endless really. And I hate to leave anyone out because I have so many, I love, I'm just lucky that I have so many friends in this business. Zoma. I love, Zoma on Lee Road at Ethiopian. I mean, he's just such a great guy and I love the flavor of that food.
As many challenges as there are, as you mentioned, there is it's quite a robust and strong scene that we have here.
It's true, and I didn't say larder, and I didn't say Aaliyah, and I didn't say Cleveland Tea Revival or Beet Jar.
Oh yeah, it is endless. There's so many.
Luna, yeah, Parnell's. We should just have it. I can just keep saying them for like 2 hours.
Well, Doug, this was incredible. I just want to thank you again for taking the time and coming on.
My pleasure. And one thing I should say too is, I just became a mentor for Global Cleveland. It's a program called Global Rising. It goes along with my journey, but I think, it's so important to, when I think of being a part of this mentorship program where there are new people coming to Cleveland and they're young entrepreneurs who are a part of, Global Cleveland has this program where they sort of have seminars and they help the new people in our community get settled. And if they have some entrepreneurial passions, they help them move those along to become more a part of our community. And I just have loved participating in that. And my mentor or my mentee is a gentleman named Aaron George, and he started a company which will supply restaurants when they have emergency needs. So like if on a Saturday night, you're out of this lettuce, you can text this number and he has this team of people that'll go out and get you the product that you need. And I just think of this idea and this person who, has worked so hard to get to Cleveland and to be a part of our community and developing this entrepreneurial business for himself and for his team. I'm just so honored to be a part of that. And I feel like it's a program that we're so lucky to have in Cleveland. So certainly wanted to mention it as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the plug. And I'd love to have him on the podcast as well.
It's called Supply Now is his company. So you'll have to talk to him.
Amazing. We'll connect for sure.
Yeah.
Well, if folks had anything they wanted to follow up with you about, what would be the best way for them to do so?
So my email is dk@chefdouglaskatz.com. And you can find me also at Amba. And if you follow us at Amba_CLE on Instagram or at ZHUGCLE on Instagram, you'll see what we're doing there. And you can always message me at either of those places. Look forward to talking to all of your people.
That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, so if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternhefe, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company, LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.